Good morning. You guys have been asking for a detailed rundown of my four-wheel drive now for a little while, so here it is. I'm going to take you through everything I've done with this vehicle over the last 4 years basically. Starting at the front, I've got a 2014 200 series Toyota Landcruiser that I bought brand new, and I've basically been working on this thing now, slowly building it up to build what I think is the ultimate overlanding vehicle. This is definitely a discussion though, so don't feel like I'm trying to tell anyone how they should do their vehicle. It really is a personal thing, I think, for everyone. What works for you, where you live, all play a huge role in what is the perfect overlanding vehicle for you. So given that I live in the Pilbara, I think this is what's perfect for me. So I'm going to start off by taking you through the engine bay, and it's a bit of a mess. Well, it's actually the cleanest it's been for a long time, but the cabling is something that drives me nuts, and that's something I'm going to be fixing up soon. I've got the standard twin battery set up as stock, like the original, but you'll see in the back corner I've got a fuel catch can. Sorry, I've got a fuel filter, secondary fuel filter system, plus an oil catch can. And with the engine as well, I've done some modifications that you've probably seen in my video I did with the guys from Richard's Auto Electrical, where they did a torque converter, ECU, and transmission remap for me. So the torque converter lockup kit's probably one of my favourite mods on this whole vehicle. So if you haven't seen that video, go check it out. ARB compressor right up the top there. I've been hoping that thing dies, to be honest. Nothing wrong with it at all, but I've been looking for an excuse to get the twin mount ARB compressor, and it just won't die. And I can't get one until it dies, sadly, so it could be a very long time before I get a new compressor. Well, let's see, what else have I done under there? Not a great deal, to be honest. The engine bay, it's really important where I go, because I'm heading remote into the middle of deserts where you're not likely to see anyone. It's really important to me that the vehicle stays reliable. So I've been quite modest when it comes to the changes that I've made in the engine bay. The tune, for instance, is quite modest. So you know, people might find that a little bit boring, but I find it reliable, and that's the main thing for me. Super reliability is incredibly important to me when it comes to these vehicles. On the front here, I've got a TJM 1200 pound winch. It's done an incredibly good job for me. You're meant to service these things every year, right? I haven't serviced this thing once. Which is terrible. Like at some stage it's going to fail on me because I'm not looking after it, but it just keeps going. It's been in there since day dot. That was put in when it only had 20 odd Ks on the clock, and it just keeps going. Love this winch. It's got Dyneema rope, and I've got a Factor 55 Ultra hook on there. The Ultra hook's a great bit of kit as well. You'll find the Ultra hook there with the two systems. It's got a closed and an open system for hooking up and winching. And being a rigger crane operator, that is very important to me for safety wise. And you can also pin out that bottom one, which is a super handy feature. You actually see, when I zoom in on this, you actually see how faded that Dyneema rope is too. So I'm up for a new winch rope at the very least in the near future, I'd say, because that can't be good for it. Just on the front here, I've plumbed my airline to the front and to the rear to make it a lot easier. when I'm airing up my tyres. I don't have to put up the bonnet. Those dodgy bloody Nissan drivers always trying to take photos of a Toyota with its bonnet up. 9 times out of 10 it's only because he's airing up. On the front you'll notice I'm running 2 enormous aerials. I'll give you a better view of that in a minute. These GME aerials, one's a 6.6 decibel aerial, the other one is an 8.2 decibel aerial. And these aerials go to 2 separate radios that I've got in the cab. And I carry 2 separate radios because of how remote some of these places I go. I want a little bit of redundancy there. That's the main reason why I carry 2 radios. And the other one is when I'm doing large convoys and whatnot, I can run scan on, well, I can really run scan on both of the radios and then hold 2 fixed channels as well. So when I'm doing something like the variety challenge, there's 55 cars and there's organizer channels and things like that. So the more radios, the easier my life is. All right, as you can see behind me, I love my lights and I do quite a bit of night forward driving, as you've probably seen. One thing that is super important to me is LED, high quality, lots of bright light. Helps me see those cattle at night before I hit them. And also, I think they keep the roos away. There's a funny thing, ever since I started getting these ultra bright LED lights, I see a lot less roos on the road, and I've put it down to perhaps because it shoots so much light down the road, they can see me coming a long time before I see them, and they get out the way, which is quite nice. I run X-ray vision 220 LED lights. I've got 6 on this one here, 4 up the top, 2 at the front, and only 2 of these are spot. The other 4 are spread beam because they pump out so much light that you don't actually need a great deal extra to do an amazing job of lighting up the road for you. So the other one that you'll notice just under there, underneath the X-ray lights, is a Rigid Industries light bar. That light bar is set up as a spotlight basically, and it's absolutely friggin' amazing. Probably shoots the light at least 1 kilometre down the road, at least. I've got this great photo that you've probably seen on my Instagram where I'm shooting light across a bay and I'm lighting up this island on the far side, and you actually see the light is good enough over there that you could probably read a paper. So huge amount of light pumped out by this thing. Absolutely stoked to have X-ray vision on board as sponsors as well. They sent me these lights within probably 2 days before I started the Canning Stock Route series. They arrived and I couldn't be happier. The lights over the roof, that's something worth talking about as well. Something that a lot of people ask, I guess, is, what's the point of them? You don't need them, rah, rah, rah. The main point of them, especially here, let me get a bit better shot. The main point of the lights over the roof, for me at least, is when I'm traveling through here in the Pilbara and out through the Kimberleys and places like that, you get this super long grass that's easily rooftop height. And as the Kimberley series comes out, you're going to see more and more of that. The light allows you at night and at dusk and whatnot to shoot light up and over the top. And I did this nice little, I was talking to the camera at the time, talking about the lights in the Kimberley series. And I'll try and find a link to that and I'll put it in here at some stage. But I'm mucking around, I'm showing you guys the light and how it works and how it shoots over the top of the long grass. And then I flick them on and you can see cattle right there. Hopefully it comes out in the GoPro footage. But yeah, there's a cow's head popped up over the top of the long grass just as I turned the lights on. Oh, I didn't know he was there. And you wouldn't know. If you only had the lights on the front, you would have no idea that he was there. So that's why I have those lights on the top. That's why it's so important. And that's why Queensland and Western Australia changed their laws back to what they used to be. The Australian design rules put out a law saying you can't have any lights up there. And very, very quickly, within probably 6 months, I think it was, West Australia, Queensland, and I think even Northern Territory very soon, if not already, will be changing the laws to make make it so you can have those back, because it's a safety thing. It's not about looks at all. Now, if I only had enough money to do one modification to my car, it would have to be tyres. Nothing in my mind will get me further down any track than quality tyres, and I've used a few now. I used to have Mickey Thompson's on my FJ Cruiser, and they were absolutely brilliant, faultless. Well, they're a bit noisy, especially towards the end of their life, but they never let me down. They never gave me any grief. They never had punctures or anything silly like that. The other tyre that I've had is the Coopers. The Coopers were the first tyres that I put on this cruiser. Brand new, I put all-terrains on it. It was the first time I'd ever used all-terrains. I've only ever gone mud terrains, and since Coopers, I've only gone mud terrains since. So now I'm not sure if I was asking too much of my tyres, or perhaps it was the tyres themselves. I'm not sure, but Coopers could not handle me or the Pilbara conditions very well. I had the ST Max on this thing, and I've never had more punctures than well, I had more punctures with that one set of 6 tyres, or 7, because I managed to destroy one as well, than I have in all the rest of my time forward driving. That one set of tyres caused me so many dramas. The worst time was driving home from work, and I used to drive down the Tom Price to Karratha access track. It's about 300 k's of dirt track, and that's how I used to go to and from work. And I was coming home, and it was about 10 o'clock at night. It's middle of nowhere, this track. I'll put up a map or something, you can have a look. About 10 o'clock at night, I got a bloody puncture, and I was so mad because the day before I'd actually cleaned out a whole bunch of my gear, and so I was a bit light on with things to change it. And I pulled the tyre off, and then I pulled one of the spares off, and then I've dropped the spare on the ground, and the spare was dead flat as well. So when that was rotated last, it had copped some sort of a slow leak, and by the time it was on the back, it was absolutely dead flat. So straight away I was down 2 tyres. It was 10 o'clock at night, it was pitch black. I didn't have my head torch because I'd taken it off and put it back in my shed, and really pissed me off. I ended up destroying one of those tyres as well, and that's where I sort of decided that those tyres weren't for me. They have an incredibly thin carcass, and I should have known, to be honest. I should have known, because when they first come out, their big claim to fame was this 14 mils of tread depth, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. But you know, I didn't realise at the time, but they hadn't actually changed their rolling diameter, and so the only way to get those extra few mil of tread depth was to take it out of the carcass width. And so sure enough, every puncture I got was straight through the gaps between the lugs and into the carcass, and that's how I destroyed one of the tyres as well. I couldn't wait to get rid of those, and I went after that with the BF Goodrich mud terrains, and they were incredible, really good. Amazing grip everywhere they went. It didn't matter what sort of terrain I put them through, whether it was muddy clay or sand or really rocky stuff like we have here, just a little bit further over at the Burrup Peninsula. They handled everything I could throw at them. I got a good 45,000 Ks out of those before they were gone, and just remember, you know, people are going to say, well, that's not a lot. Just remember, I do far more four-wheel driving than the average sort of person, so I'm not going to get as much life. I'm not going to get as much life out of my tyres as perhaps you guys do. Now I've, and just in the nick of time, because those BF Goodrich were really on their last legs and starting to get noisy and horrible and scalloped out and everything. Now I've got the General Grabbers, they're brand new X3 mud terrains, and the boys at Continental, and Continental own General Tyres. Those boys, I approached them and said, look, I need a hand, my tyres are shot, and I reckon what you guys have looks the goods, and I'd love to try them out. And so Generals were amazing, and they've actually come on board as a sponsor since then. So I'm very, very lucky to have the support that I do. Now I'm not going to give you a review on the General Grabbers because I've only had them now for about 4,000 Ks. But I'll tell you my first impressions of them. And the first impressions are pretty good. The first thing I noticed just driving on sealed road around Perth when I got them put on is the rolling resistance is probably the lowest I've come across of any tyre in a long time. Straight away I needed to brake more, just simply because these big muddies weren't creating the rolling resistance that others used to. And it was nice. They were nice to drive. They're not noisy at all. You can't even hear them. So they're the quietest mud terrains I've ever come across. And when I look at the pattern on the tyres, I feel like they're kind of an all-terrain mud terrain, if that makes sense at all. It is a chunky, square, blocky pattern on these tyres, but they travel like an all-terrain. So I'm looking forward to see how they go. I've had them in sand. When I took Andrew, St. Pierre White and the Alucab guys out to Lancelin and Wedge Island and places like that, there was plenty of soft sand around. I went straight down to 15 PSI and never had to change them after that. Very, very good. The sidewalls are nice and protected. They didn't bag out too much in the sides, which makes your sidewalls quite vulnerable. So I'm really happy so far, so good. So I will definitely give you another review, maybe once I've done sort of 20-odd thousand Ks and some big trips on these things. I'll let you know a little bit more about them. So yeah, that's it on the tyre front.